Are you interested in learning how to make a dairy-free eggnog that's every bit as delicious as the real thing? Then stay tuned, because today's episode is just for you. Welcome to Cocktail Limelight. I'm your host, Eric Castro, and today we're going to be learning how to make a dairy-free version of eggnog that's every bit as delicious as the original, rich with all of the traditional flavors that we associate with a more classic eggnog. In fact, this version can even be made vegan if you'd like to. However, you really want to make sure that the brands that you're using are vegan as well, which is why I hesitate to refer to this as a vegan eggnog, because it really comes down to which rum, which vermouth, and which cognac you're using. We're very fortunate because you can go online and find some great resources to verify if the spirits that you're using are indeed vegan. Now let me give you a little bit of background onto why I even bothered trying to come up with this recipe. And that's because in the past I've had dietary restrictions that I had to adhere to for health reasons. And because of that, it really bummed me out when I was left out of the festivities and couldn't partake in the same food and drink as everybody else. And because a lot of our guests coming into the bar had an aversion to dairy, I realized I needed to come up with an alternative for them that was every bit as delicious. Now, the first hurdle that I ran into when I was trying to create a non-dairy eggnog was how to replicate the mouthfeel that you get from eggs and cream, because the two of those can create a very dense texture that is very difficult to replicate, especially because those two items together have such a high fat content. And luckily for me, I ended up finding that in cashew milk. I found a preference for that due to its high fat content. However, if you prefer another milk alternative out there, it should work just as well, provided it has a high enough fat content, because fat can lend that delicious creaminess. That's what we're looking for when we're drinking an eggnog. Now, to maximize the body that you find in this drink, we also use a bit of sweet vermouth and Falernum, both of which are prized for the texture that they lend to a cocktail. And as an added bonus, both of those ingredients have flavors that are perfect for holiday cocktails. And after weeks of experimentation, I finally pinned down the non-dairy eggnog recipe that I'm sharing with you today. And in fact, I was so pleased with the flavor of this drink that it was on our seasonal menu at our award-winning bar, Raised by Wolves. And although I mentioned earlier that I encourage you riffing on this recipe, I would urge you at the same time, the first time you make it, to follow this recipe as close as possible. That way you have a good baseline of where the drink is supposed to be and get familiar with that before you decide to tweak it. And trust me, this template that you're gonna learn today is ripe for experimentation, as it's easy to plug and play everything from the spirits to the sweeteners. But enough of me chit-chatting, let's go ahead and whip up a batch now. To make a batch of this non-dairy eggnog, first start out with a large vessel and add 85 mils of grade B authentic maple syrup. And remember, you wanna use real maple syrup here. None of this pancake syrup that's just high fructose corn syrup mixed with food coloring. That's no good and is not worthy of mixing with delicious spirits. Next, we're gonna add 20 mils of Allspice Dram, along with 125 mils of Falernum. For those of you out there unfamiliar with Falernum, it's a liqueur rich with the flavors of citrus pills, Caribbean spices, and clove. Next, we're gonna add 375 mils of sweet vermouth. Next, we're gonna add 125 mils. Next, we're gonna add 125 mils of cognac, along with 375 mils of Jamaican rum. Now that we have all of our booze, along with our sweetener in this container, we're gonna top it off with 1.5 liters of cashew milk. Now that we have all the ingredients in this big tub, we're gonna give it all a good stir to ensure that all of our ingredients are nice and integrated. Now, this drink itself is so tasty and so well replicates the flavor of holiday nog. I've actually served this to vegans before in the bar and had them flip out on me because they didn't believe me that there wasn't cream and egg in it. Which, in all honesty, I kind of take as a compliment, because I replicated the texture and flavor so close that it was fooling people as to what was actually in the drink. If you plan on serving this drink cold, I would go ahead and put it in the fridge for a few hours to get everything nice and chill. However, if you prefer to serve it hot, you can put it in a crock pot or something along those lines to keep it nice and warm. But since I'm gonna be serving this cold, I'm gonna go ahead and stash this in the fridge for about 4 or 5 hours to get everything nice and cold. Now that it's been 4 hours, I'm gonna go ahead and pull this out of the fridge and serve it over ice. Now, as for the garnish, we're gonna hit it with a little bit of grated nutmeg along with the cinnamon stick. And there you have it, folks, another cocktail recipe to add to your holiday repertoire. That's important to know, not just because it's delicious, but also because it helps everybody partake in the festivities. Just because you don't consume dairy doesn't mean that you don't like to be swept off your feet with the holiday spirit. And hopefully, this drink helps you do just that. Now, with that said, are there any other cocktail suggestions that you'd like us to feature on a future episode? If so, leave them in the comments down below, and maybe it'll be featured in a future episode of Cocktail Limelight. Now, don't forget to muddle that like and subscribe button, and if you'd like to dive deeper into the world of craft cocktails, be sure to check out the Bartender Large podcast, which I host on iTunes, Spotify, and anywhere else where quality podcasts are found. Thank y'all so much for tuning in, and we will see you again next week.